America is one of the richest countries in the world, but people here are still hungry. A recent federal report found that more than 44 million Americans lived in households last year that didn't have enough food to feed every family member throughout the year. School-based nutrition programs are helping to fill that gap by providing healthy meals to children and young people. Let's learn more about the important role these meals play in keeping kids healthy from Cindy Long. She is the administrator of the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Services, and she is here in Milwaukee to learn more about local programming serving kids and their families. Welcome, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
We all think about hunger and providing support at this time of year, but can you talk about how hunger is really a year-round issue in our country?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the figures that you cited really do show that although we are a wealthy country, there are millions and millions of American families who struggle to put food on the table every day. And USDA's nutrition programs are an incredibly important support for those families. And that is why I'm so happy to have the opportunity to be here in Milwaukee and later into other parts of Wisconsin, just to see the incredible work that's being done at the local community level to utilize these programs to really help tackle the problem of hunger and food insecurity and help Americans put food on the table and make sure their children are well fed.
One of the key programs that your department runs is the school lunch program.
Right.
How important are those programs to really making sure that as many children as possible in America are well fed or are receiving at least one nutritious meal a day?
Well, they're incredibly important. You know, if you think about the country as a whole, on any given school day, over 30 million children eat lunch at school. About 2/3 of those also eat breakfast. And so in many cases, they're getting more than half of their calories, their intake at school. And now the research has shown that schools are already the healthiest source for meals for kids. But we have the opportunity to do so much more to make school meals an even more nutritious and impactful program in terms of setting kids up for a healthy start, to be prepared to learn while they're in school, and to really, learn good nutrition habits from a very early age.
How important is it for children to have those healthy meals in schools when it comes to what they're able to learn and how well they're able to learn?
Well, sure. You know, I think of it as really there are short-term benefits and there are long-term benefits. And you're in the immediate term, a child isn't going to be able to concentrate in class, isn't going to do well on a test if they're fidgeting and just can't focus because they're hungry. And you will hear that from teachers in every school that they'll go into. And then the data again shows that kids do better in school. There are fewer visits to the nurse's office because folks have tummy aches. So it definitely prepares them to do better while they're in school on any given day. And then in the longer term, it puts kids on a healthy start to have a source for good, well-balanced breakfast and lunch every single day. They learn about how to eat, what their connection to food is, and puts them on a path for a healthier lifestyle. And, in a country where we are paying tremendous financial and human costs associated with diet-related disease, that is critically important.
So children really, by having these very healthy meals, they're learning at an early age, and unfortunately, it may be the only place that they learn what good nutrition looks like.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's an incredibly important start for kids. And again, I'm really pleased to be here in Wisconsin to see the incredible vision and creativity that's happening in communities across the state to embrace this program, to do everything they can to make it stronger. I'm going to be meeting with a number of schools while I'm here to learn about what they're doing around things like moving more to scratch cooking, bringing more local foods into the schools and forging a connection between kids and where their food comes from, and really strengthening the local community. This is really a high priority for the Biden-Harris administration. Traditionally, USDA sometimes has kind of set the rules for these programs and then kind of sat back and let them run. in this administration, in this USDA, we are choosing to lean in and really support these programs. We've provided almost $4 billion in additional funding over the last several years to help schools deal with challenges in getting healthy food during the supply chain. And we've had the opportunity to provide hundreds of millions of dollars in additional targeted grant funds to help schools do things like upgrade their equipment and train their staff. And again, forge those connections between local producers and schools, all in the service of providing healthier and more appealing meals to kids to put them on that healthy start.
What are some of the other advantages of scratch cooking, really looking and working with local farmers to provide even more fresh produce? What are some of the advantages of that program for our students and for our young people?
Well, there are many advantages. From a nutritional point of view, if schools are able to do more scratch cooking, and it doesn't always have to be all scratch, but if they're able to do more scratch cooking, they can do things like they have more control over what's going into the food. So they can do things like try to reduce sodium, try to put in less added sugar. So there's a real strong potential for an improvement in the nutrition profile. There's huge potential to make the food just appealing and tasty. I think we all can agree that delicious fresh food is wonderful, and we enjoy eating that more than some of the alternatives. So it really, again, forges that connection between kids and healthy foods, and frankly helps teach them where foods come from. You'd be amazed that sometimes you'll go into a school and maybe they'll have a school garden, and the kids will be so excited to see the carrots coming out of the ground because they've only ever seen carrots in a package from a grocery store. And it's really meaningful and really something to see.
One of the programs that many school districts are now participating in is the community eligibility provision, which allows school districts to provide free meals to all kids regardless of income. What are some of the advantages that you're seeing from that program for those districts that are participating?
Well, again, it's an example where there are many, many different kinds of benefits when schools are able to provide all kids with a healthy meal without worrying about having to take applications and process that paperwork to figure out who gets them at what cost. So there's a paperwork advantage. It's so much easier for families not to have to worry about putting money on their cards or sending their kids with funds. And so every single family can know that their student is going to have access to a healthy meal for lunch and breakfast every single day. We hear, and there's research to show that it reduces any stigma or negativity for kids who used to rely on free meals that was associated with being in that program. One of the really critical benefits is that it typically puts schools on kind of a more stable financial footing for their nutrition program, because when everyone can eat at no cost, pretty much everyone eats.
One other program that really has a tremendous impact on children is WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children's Program, which provides nutritional support to families of infants and children. That tends to be a pretty popular program, but there have been some recent concerns about whether or not Congress is going to continue to provide the level of support that's making a difference in so many lives.
Yeah, and that is such a timely question. WIC is such an important program. Over half of the infants in the United States participate in WIC. Here in Wisconsin, there were over 85,000 participants, 85,000 women, infants, and children last year. It's a program that really helps put kids on a path towards a healthy future.
Thanks so much for being with us, Administrator Long. It's important, I think, for people to understand that there are certainly short-term impacts of the programs that you run around food and nutrition, but there are also long-term impacts to the health of our young people and their lives as they grow in age. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about these fabulous programs. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll be back right after this short break.